First, please welcome astronaut Jeremy Hansen, who will give us an overview of the Artemis missions. Jeremy was born in London, Ontario, and raised on a farm near Elsa Craig, Ontario, until moving to Ingersoll for his high school years. His flight experience began at the age of 12 when he joined the Air Cadet program. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Space Science and a Master of Science in Physics from the Royal Military College in Kingston, Ontario. He was one of 2 recruits selected by the Canadian Space Agency in May 2009. While waiting for a flight assignment, Jeremy works at Mission Control Center as Capcom, the voice between the ground and the ISS. I've looked up to Jeremy for a long time, and I'm really excited to hear his presentation today, and I'm sure all of you are too, so take it away, Jeremy.
Hi, Aaron. I had to drop off and back on. I had a technical difficulty, but here I am. You're not talking anymore, so I assume the introduction is over. Is that right? I'm good to go? All right. Sorry, everybody, for that. Everything's working now on my end. That's the way technology works, even with like fighter jets and spaceships. Sometimes we just have to turn them off and turn them back on, and then everything works. So great to have some time with you today. My name's Jeremy, and I just want to chat a little bit about space exploration and what inspires me and what I think is relevant to you as young Canadians, and the opportunities, the immense opportunities that are coming your way, and how space is changing. So I haven't flown in space yet, but that's my goal right now, and I'm working really hard. And I'm a very fortunate Canadian that I'm going to have the opportunity to fly in space in the next few years. And for me, it started as a young Canadian. I grew up on a farm in Southern Ontario, and I opened up a book. It was an Encyclopedia A, and I came across Armstrong. So encyclopedias were these books before we had the internet, where you could go and just learn about stuff, sort of like the internet. And Neil Armstrong was the first human being to walk on the moon. And under the title Armstrong, I saw a picture like this one you're seeing on your screen. And it just sort of like clicked a switch in my brain. I thought, wow, that is incredible. Even though it had happened before I was born, it was amazing to me that humans had left planet Earth, traveled all the way to the moon, left boot prints there, and come back safely to Earth. And from that moment on, I had a spark inside of me. I wanted to be a space explorer. And, I did one important thing. I shared with other people that was interesting to me, and they helped me develop along the way and learn about it and start to prepare myself for one day traveling to space. You see that image of me. My parents took me to the Kennedy Space Center to learn more about space there. Next slide, please. And so along that journey, I had a passion for aviation as well. And I thought there was a connection there. There are many ways to become an astronaut, but one of them is through aviation, is a good path. And so I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I saw a jet fly at the air show, and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool too. And so I joined the Air Cadet program, a great youth program in Canada that helped me prepare, get my pilot's license. But more importantly, it helped me with self-confidence and leadership. I was pretty shy. I didn't actually like to get in front of people and talk or give commands on a parade square, but Air Cadets taught me that. They taught me to be a leader. They taught me to have self-confidence and be a good Canadian citizen. And those were pretty fundamental things for me that I still use today. And they prepared me to join the Royal Canadian Air Force as a fighter pilot. I flew F-18s for many years. I still fly jets, and aviation has been a long-standing passion of mine. But I always had in the back of my head that someday I would like to go to space. And so when the Canadian Space Agency put out a call for astronauts in 2008, I applied. And that other picture you see there is David Saint-Jacques, my friend, and I were hired together in 2009 to start training as astronauts. And we moved down to the Canadian Space Agency. We moved down to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas to start training there. I'll take the next slide, please. And now we have an astronaut corps of 4 active astronauts. So I just introduced you to David, and then you see Jenny and Josh in the middle of that image. And so the 4 of us work really closely together as part of an enormous team of people that makes human spaceflight possible here in Canada, the Canadian Space Agency, and also with our international partners at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I'll tell you, one thing, we have different backgrounds. We're not all pilots. researchers, scientists, physicians, teachers. We have lots of different backgrounds in the astronaut corps. We're all very, very different. But there is one thing that we have in common, and it is that when we look back at our lives, we see that certain things shaped where we ended up and the opportunities we had, the opportunities we've had. And the biggest thing, if I could share one important message with you today, that would be set goals in your life and share those goals with other people. And you will be amazed at how others will help you accomplish those goals. All right, next slide, please. So at the Johnson Space Center, we do things that you would expect to train as astronauts. So spacewalk training, such cool thing to do. We get in real spacesuits, we go under the water because they're super heavy. So you can't really walk around in them and just train in them. So we put them underwater so it feels like we're floating in microgravity. And then we go and we do what we would do in a spacewalk on board the International Space Station. We repair it. We just do it underwater. Really fun training. The other one you see there is Canadarm training. So of course, we have to learn as astronauts how to fly the Canadarm and do repairs with Canadarm, capture visiting vehicles, help astronauts on spacewalks. All really neat stuff. Next slide. And that has been the focus of the Canadian Astronaut Corps for many years now, has been either building the International Space Station or today just maintaining it and doing science on board the station. And this is exactly what this is. This is like our school in outer space. It's where we go to learn about the human body in space. We can look back at the planet. We can learn about the Earth from the International Space Station, and we can even look out into the solar system and learn about that. So the International Space Station is a really incredible laboratory for us, built to learn. And it's an amazing place. What a cool place to work. You know, at the end of your workday, you can float to the window and look out. And because the space station is traveling 28,000 kilometers an hour around the planet, in the time that you and I would watch a documentary on TV or a movie, you can see an entire lap around the planet. And I haven't seen it yet with my own eyes. So many of my friends have come back and they're just blown away by it. It's the one thing I can't wait to experience as a human being, is seeing the Earth from space and spending 90 minutes staring out the window and seeing one time around the planet. Super excited about that. Next slide. So like I said, we've been working on the International Space Station, but in over 50 years, humans have not been back to the moon. You know, that thing that inspired me as a young Canadian has not been done by a human since the early 1970s. And now we are getting ready to go back to the moon. Next slide. So the first step for us is building something called Lunar Gateway. We've already started work on this. The Lunar Gateway is just that. It is a gateway to the surface of the moon, and also a gateway to out further into the solar system. So like a gateway to Mars, for example, or to visit asteroids or other moons. And so that's why we're building the gateway. Sort of like if you're traveling around Canada, like I came here to Houston from Houston. So in order to get, I'm in Ottawa today. So in order to get to Ottawa, I had to fly to one airport, then get on another airplane and fly to another airport. That's kind of what the gateway is. It's a hub. And so we will fly, in the future, we will fly to the gateway, we will get in a lunar lander, and then we will take that down to the moon. And when we're done, we'll come back to the gateway and we'll leave that lander there, and we'll be able to reuse portions or all of that lander at some point in the future. So that's the idea of the gateway. It's a pretty ambitious undertaking to go to a space station that far away from Earth. So the International Space Station is only 400 kilometers away, but the moon is 400,000 kilometers away. So it's really complex to do this work. And next slide. Part of that complexity is learning how to do things like space robotics so far away from home. So right now we control the robotic arm from the ground, or astronauts control it from space, but there's not much delay between when we send a command and see the result. But the moon has a much more significant delay, so that's not going to work. And so we have to build more autonomy into this arm, and even some artificial intelligence for the planning cycles to help us use this arm to the full of its capability. So this is a big challenge that Canada has taken on. We said we will solve this problem of deep space robotics, and it's not trivial. So super proud of Canada for that. Next slide. And because of that significant contribution by Canada, we are now part of something called Artemis. And Artemis is humans returning to the surface of the moon. We have a uncrewed test flight means a test flight of this vehicle called Orion coming up, hopefully in less than a month from now, we're going to fly it. And then Artemis 2, which will be in about 2 years, we've been invited to have a Canadian astronaut on board. So we're super pumped about this. There are going to be 3 American astronauts and a Canadian astronaut. We are going to be the second country in the world to send a human beyond low Earth orbit and out around the moon. So super pumped about that. And then Artemis 3 is going to be astronauts going to the surface of the moon for the first time in over 50 years. Next slide. So how do we get that capsule, that Orion capsule, to deep space? Well, we need a big rocket. And so this is the SLS rocket. And that's a real picture of it. That's not a drawing. And it's in Florida right now. It's in the vehicle assembly building. We're going to roll it back out to the launch pad, and we intend to launch it now on November 14th. It's really hard to fly a rocket for the first time. You have to be, really careful, a lot of testing. You have to kind of learn how to wake it up and refuel it. And we've had a few snags along the way, and we're slowly working through them. And we're excited to see this thing fly very shortly. All right, next slide. All right, now I want to talk about Canada's future. Right now, we have 4 priorities at the Canadian Space Agency. So this is the first one, Canadian robotics. So we've been working on Canadarm robotics for many years, but we are also working on rover robotics. So lunar rovers, for example, or Martian rovers. And so this robotics area is really neat because we see it being commercialized. And this is huge opportunity for Canada. So we're going to need a lot more people working on robotics, space robotics in the future. It's going to be a lot more space robotics jobs, a lot more economic value for the country. So it's a future industry for Canada, and we are being very intentional to steward it and make sure we have advantages in that area. Next slide. The other one I wanted to touch on is climate. Obviously, climate is a huge problem for humanity, and it's a global problem. And if you want to take the heartbeat of planet Earth, the best place to do that is from space. You can put a satellite around the Earth, and the Earth turns underneath. You can see the entire planet with one satellite. So we are harnessing space to help us tackle climate change challenges. Next slide. Health. This is an area where it's good. We already have to take care of astronauts with respect to health on board the International Space Station, but doing it at the moon and on Mars is significantly more challenging. And this problem overlaps with health in remote areas of Canada. So we're doing some really cool stuff right now to help solve healthcare on the planet and take those solutions to space with our international partnership. Huge opportunities in health. Next slide. And food, we're doing the exact same thing. So we're going to work on growing food. We're already doing this, growing food in the Arctic, and then taking that expertise to grow food on the moon and eventually Mars. Because if we can't grow food in the Arctic, we certainly can't do it on the moon. And so we're going to solve it here on the planet first. Next slide. So some of you, I'm sure, are interested in flying in space yourself, and there are going to be many more opportunities in the future for people to fly to space. But some of you have no interest in going to space, but maybe space interests you as a solution to problems facing our planet. And so I just want to tell you, although we have a core of only 4 astronauts, we have an enormous team of people at the Canadian Space Agency and across the country in space industry. And we all work together. We're talking about like 20,000 people, and that's growing. In fact, we think the space economy is going to triple in less than 10 years. That's a significant requirement for people in space jobs. So if space is something that interests you, or you see how space could help humanity, we really need your help. And whether you want to go to space or just be on our space team, there's going to be lots of room for you. Next slide. Now, on the subject of helping humanity, using space to help humanity, we're launching the Space Brain Hack. So this is kind of like a hackathon type of approach. And so, or citizen science. So you can actually get involved now to help us solve space problems. And so we're going to share the website with you here, the Space Brain Hack. You'll have it available. And today they're going to put more information out on this. But basically, the first problem we want you to help us solve is how do astronauts who travel so far into space maintain a healthy connection back to the planet, a healthy mental connection, and a healthy connection with friends, family, et cetera. So we're looking for ideas on that. Next slide. This will be my last one. Just to close out, there are many ways to explore space. You can send astronauts in a rocket to space to explore, but we can explore through knowledge that we've already learned. We can use telescopes like the James Webb Space Telescope to explore space. This is just an amazing picture that we've gotten back. It's a Southern Ring Nebula. You see two bright stars sort of in the middle. One's right in the middle of that bright blob, and then there's another one off to the side. And you see how they're very different. And the one that's in the bright blob, it's because it's coming to the end of its life as a star and it's blowing off most of its outer mass already. And now we see really bright ultraviolet rays. And that's very different from the star that's right next door to it. There's so much we can learn with the James Webb Space Telescope and lots of other ways to learn as well. But the message to you is what do you want to learn about? What do you love to learn about? What do you want to do for setting goals? What's important to you? Knowing what you want, sharing it with others is going to lead to incredible opportunities for you. I look forward to taking your questions when we're done here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, for that inspiring presentation. I think it's amazing to hear about Canada's contributions to spaceflight and particularly about how we're getting involved in humans returning to the moon. I also really liked what you mentioned about the importance of goal setting.